I embarked on the greatest double feature of 2023, and I can't wait to tell you about it. People were dressed up, they were coming in droves with their families to experience something really dark and then something really fun and colorful, and it was just a great time at the movies. So it's time to tell you about Saw Patrol. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo. See what I was doing at the beginning there? I was making you think I was talking about Barbenheimer, but I was really talking about Saw Patrol. Saw Patrol will cut your limbs off double. Anyway, this is the Saw Patrol video, the long-anticipated Saw Patrol video. I started this journey at the very beginning of the month, and then I started watching a new horror film every single day in October, and I realized, I was like, I never released my Saw Patrol review. I have notes written down, I have a camera ready to film it, but I just haven't gotten around to making it. So here we are at the end of October, a month later, where it's been able to marinate on my brain and I'm able to tell you about Saw Patrol, which is such a fun idea for a double feature. I mean, look at Barbenheimer. Those movies could not be any more different, but I think they were at least connected by the fact that you had like two prestige directors, one who is really well established, Christopher Nolan, one who is still on the rise to becoming a Christopher Nolan level of popularity director, Greta Gerwig. It was two different genres, but they still felt like they had the same caliber of prestige because they were both, you know, in the talks of potentially being Oscar films. I think there was a real good connective tissue between Oppenheimer and Barbie to where they were different enough, but they still made sense to see together. Pivot to Saw Patrol, and I don't think these two films have literally anything in common, but that's what made for such a fun double feature, because I was literally sitting with a bunch of adults at Saw, some younger people, but no kids, just watching this movie, getting whatever we got out of it, and then going to see Paw Patrol, and actually seeing people dressed up, people wearing costumes, you know, people bringing their kids. I was probably the only adult who went alone without a child. It was a little awkward at first, but you know what? I got a seat right in the middle, surrounded by all these kids, and you know, it was really kind of cute to kind of see these kids kind of get excited about their own version of like the Avengers, right? Because this is a show that is geared towards like a really, really young age. So this is probably some of these kids' first movie in theaters, and they know these characters, they love these characters. It's really that Leonardo DiCaprio meme of them pointing at the screen and saying, oh my god, I recognize that's Skye, or that's any of the other dogs. I don't know, Skye's the only one I remember because Skye's my favorite. I love Skye, she's adorable. But it was really nice to see, and in the movie, something happens early on, like their equivalent of the Avengers Tower comes down, and all the kids in my theater were crying and like, oh no, and like having visceral reactions to this film, not because they were restless and needed to make noise and get out of their chairs, but because they were emotionally invested in this Paw Patrol movie. And it was kind of endearing to see, you know, as an adult, watching all these younger, you know, this new generation of film goers kind of have these emotional responses to a movie. It's a good reminder of why we go to the movies and why we share movies with others. And even as someone who went alone, it was really nice to just kind of absorb that atmosphere in a similar way that Oppenheimer and Barbie was. Because I saw Oppenheimer first, it was a little darker, a little colder, and then I went into Barbie, and just the atmosphere of the crowd was so fun and so playful, and I think that's exactly what I got here. Now, as I said, these movies could not be any further apart in subject matter. I mean, the first film, Saw X, is obviously dealing with, this guy who is trying to get treatment for his cancer, and then turns out, when he finds out that it is a scam, he decides to put all the scam artist doctors in his traps and basically get his vengeance out on them. And then Paw Patrol, the mighty movie, being basically the Avengers with dogs. You know, they come across this crystal, and then they all get powers, and they all become superhero dogs. And I think both of those are just very clear-cut premises, but they made for a really fun day at the movies. I enjoyed both films. Saw X, I did a whole TikTok for on my 31 Days of Halloween countdown on my TikTok, but I'll tell you about it now. I really loved this. As someone who really hasn't liked the Saw films for the 9 films I saw of them, no pun intended, I'm going to say Saw a lot, but I saw all 9 films right before this one came out, and I was just never really hooked. I mean, there were moments of each one that hooked me, but I was just kind of not a fan of the overall choppy visual style, you know, grimy, dirty type atmospheres and stuff. It's a very distinct style, but it wasn't necessarily a style I liked. So Saw X, it kind of approaches it as more of like a character study, where we're following John Kramer as he's older, as he's kind of reflecting on his mortality, and he decides to try to get help, one last ditch effort, and then when it fails him, to see how he kind of turns and like has this last big set of traps. I mean, it was kind of the don't breathe 2 thing of like, should I be rooting for the serial killer? Because, in that movie, Don't Breathe 2, it was very problematic. This is a guy who literally raped a character in the first movie, and now I'm supposed to root for him. Whereas here it's a little bit different because I think the movie actually wants to have the conversation about morality and actually like weigh out the pros and cons and say, well, he was wronged. Like, he obviously has the right to feel this way, but what he's doing is still not necessarily right. Like, the movie actually has that argument and has that discussion, which I actually appreciated, because for a movie like this, when you're humanizing a serial killer, you need to have those discussions to show the audience that you're not condoning behavior, especially because this is, a movie that younger people are still going to see. I'm not talking about Paw Patrol age, but like, kids in their teens or tweens even are probably going to go see this film, so they need to understand that what John Kramer is doing is still not the best way to do it. It's just, in this universe, this movie made it really easy to root for him and root against the victims, and the people in the traps wholeheartedly are bad people, and I think that actually helps too, especially from a horror perspective, because you're not necessarily rooting for them to escape, even though you have that kind of moral dilemma in the back of your head the whole time. And I think the traps themselves, because this is kind of a prequel, this kind of takes place between Saw and Saw 2, I think you get a lot of great kind of old-fashioned, old-school traps, and all the traps feel kind of grounded, but still visceral. I mean, it never felt like I was watching a dated film, but it almost felt more special to see this kind of like throwback to his older traps and not this like new high-tech laser beams, all these things. It was really interesting to kind of get a more grounded approach to the horror itself, and I really enjoyed it. It was surprising how much I enjoyed it, because up till now, I think the first Saw film was my favorite, but even then, I didn't love the first Saw film. I'm not a big James Wan guy. I like Lee Winnell, but I just was not a fan of any of those movies, and then all of a sudden, Saw X comes around, and I'm like being emotionally invested in this character. I'm actually feeling the visceral nature of these traps. I'm squirming in my seat. Like, it's all these reactions and responses that I wanted to have for the first 9, but I never did, and now I finally do for the 10th one.
It's time to play a game.
So it's definitely a recommendation, especially if you've seen all the other Saw films. I think you'll like this as kind of like this kind of prequel that kind of connects to the other Saw films. There's great moments for fans, but even if you're not a fan of the Saw films, even if you've never seen one, I think this is a good standalone film in itself. I think you could just go to the movies and enjoy it without any preconceived notion, because this really is only the second one in the actual continuity of the timeline, and even then, it's like, you don't need to know who Amanda is to appreciate this film. It helps, but you don't. And I think that's what's so nice about it. It's so refreshing, and it doesn't have that choppy, kind of all over the place editing style either. It has a distinct editing style, but it feels very much more grounded, very much more comfortable on the eyes. So I was a big fan of Saw X.
I'm never gonna get to sleep. Well, you're probably more tired than you...
Now going over to Paw Patrol, the Mighty movie, as I said, it was a very big change of pace. It was a very whiplash moment, and it was even scarier when they played the Dora short beforehand. I mean, of all the jump scares in Saw X, I mean, none of those compared to seeing Dora's face just pop up on the screen ahead of me. I didn't know everyone was doing the Pixar thing of putting a short film before a feature, and that's a fun approach, but why did it have to be Dora? I don't know. It scared the crap out of me. Once we got past those abysmal 5 minutes, we got into the Paw Patrol Mighty movie, and it was cute. I mean, I had seen the first movie in preparation for this video and this marathon, and I thought it was okay. I thought it was just a little too dumbed down and geared towards kids, which is fine because it's not for me, it's for young kids. But I feel like this movie was actually probably a lot more enjoyable for the adults and for the people who wanted to kind of be part of the bit and the meme and see both these films. I think I was actually given a lot more in this movie to chew on. There was an actual story that I felt was a lot more engrossing. I thought the actual superpowers were kind of fun to explore. I like the idea that one of the dogs doesn't get a superpower, but she finds her own superpower. It reminded me of Encanto in that way, how Mirabelle doesn't have a gift, but she still makes the best of it, and turns out she was the gift all along. It's just really cute little lessons that I could definitely see my kids someday enjoying. I don't have kids, but when I have kids, that was what I meant to say. Sorry, Mom, do not freak out.
Great! Now the clumsy pup shoots fireballs out of his paw.
But yeah, I was just really really charmed by it. And this is not going to be one of the best films of the year. It may not even be one of the best animated films of the year, even though it is currently in my top 5 animated films of the year, because I think it understands what it is, and it really just kind of commits to being that. It doesn't try to be anything bigger or broader, but because it is a theatrical release, it does feel like more than just a TV episode. It feels like it actually has a cinematic quality to it, so much so to where I was saying, like, the audience was having really visceral responses to it, and I just think it's so fun to see a day of the movies where you can see kind of the oldest people, you know, the older kids go to see Saw X and kind of have these emotional, loud responses to all the horror, and then see these younger kids and their parents having these great emotional responses to Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie. It was just such a good day at the theaters, and like I said, there's really not a ton to expand on with Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie, because I think Saw X is kind of the one where you can really dissect and discuss, whereas the Mighty Movie, it's kind of what you see is what you get. But what I got was a really fun time at the movie, so I highly recommend, if you have kids, if you're, if you are a kid and you're watching this, thank you, be careful, because I curse on some of my other videos. But if you are a kid, if you have a kid, I think this is going to be a really fun treat for them. And if you are a horror buff, I think Saw X is going to be a really fun time for you, whether you're a fan of the franchise or not, especially if you're a fan of the franchise, because I think it takes the franchise in new directions they've never seen before. And while I'm at it, part of this whole experience, though, was binging all the Paw Patrol and Saw films, so I figured why not just give a ranking of all of these films to let you know what I thought of this whole 12-film extravaganza marathon I watched. So at the bottom at number 12 is Saw 3D. I think it's just a little too silly to be taken seriously. Then I put Saw 4, which I just find to be a complete headache. Then I put Spiral. It's just really boring, and Chris Rock is really, really bad in it. Then I would have to put Saw 5. Again, it's kind of boring, but at least it has a few scenes, especially the ending, that is kind of engaging and kind of entertaining. Then we're going to go into Saw 3, which I think is very Shakespearean, but still a little bit of a mess. Then we're going to move on to Jigsaw, which I understand Saw fans aren't a fan of it, but hey, maybe it's just because I watched these all at once, so maybe it stuck more for me. Next is where I'll put the original Paw Patrol movie. Then I put Saw 2, which is great because it has John Kramer front and center. Those are always the best Saw films to me. Then Saw 6, which is a great commentary on the healthcare systems in America, and I thought that was a really interesting twist to the story, even though it didn't have a lot of John Kramer. Then I'll probably put Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie, because let's be honest, it's still not going to be the top of this overall ranking, but I did like it a good deal. And then number 2, we'll put Saw, the original, just because it is the original. If you are a fan of the franchise, I think there's a lot that Saw does right, that sets up for success for the rest, but also kind of paints a bad portrait for others, where Saw X is going to be the top of this ranking as the film I think I was most connected to, most enjoyed, and I think it kind of does away with any of the bad stylistic elements of the original Saw and all their sequels. So there's my ranking of all 12, because hey, why not? I watched all 12 of these for this video. So thank you so much for watching, and tomorrow is going to be a big one here on the channel, because we got 2 videos coming for you. We have a draft day where we are going to be drafting horror performances, and then at night we are going to have our 31 Days of Halloween wrap-up video. I've been posting a TikTok every single day on the Dyl Pickle Movie Network TikTok page of myself reviewing a different movie every single day for Halloween, but now I'm going to partner back up with Kelsey, my co-host from Marvelous Movie Mondays, and we're going to talk about our overall month of viewing and what our top 5 movies were, our bottom 5 movies, and our 5 scariest moments in those movies. And the past 2 days, I've also posted some videos. We have a frame rec episode of Halloween 4, 5, and 6, and of course a Picture This episode for 1999, the best picture year, 1999, which saw an M. Night Shyamalan horror film, The Sixth Sense. It saw a Stephen King adaptation, The Green Mile. It had a horrific Michael Caine accent in Cider House Rules, and the star of American Beauty, also very scary. So that's something to take a look at if you're interested. And thank you so much to these fellow subscribers for their help in donating as part of the subathon back in February. Their donations are definitely acknowledged and well appreciated. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll see you around.